April 11th, 1970, Apollo 13 launched from Cape Kennedy, Florida, carrying three astronauts, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes. Their mission was supposed to be the third moon landing in history, right? You guys may know this story. You may have seen the movie, the Tom Hanks movie, great movie, Apollo 13. And at first, everything was going smoothly, but 2 days into the mission, about 200,000 miles away, something went wrong. There was an explosion in one of the oxygen tanks. Right? They started losing power. They had issues with electricity. There was warning signs, alarms blaring, and the famous words you guys know: "Houston, we've got a problem." Right? That's what was said during that time. And so now this mission that they looked so forward to go land on the moon has no longer was a mission to the moon. Was how can we get back home? Can we survive this mission? And so you guys may remember if you've seen the movie or read stories or articles about this, they move into the lunar landing module, and that becomes their escape capsule, right? It's their lifeboat, and they divert power to it. They have oxygen that is supposed to last 2 people for 2 days to get home. It needs to last 3 people 4 days. And so this is this dire situation they're in. And as the story goes on, in the movie, you can see the things happen as they're moving toward Earth. And one of the most dangerous parts of the whole trip was when they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And I don't know if you guys remember this, or remember reading about it, or remember again in the movie. As they come in and they need to go through into the Earth's atmosphere, there's this time where they lose radio contact, right? Typically, it's a 3-minute window. So they hit the Earth's atmosphere, and for 3 minutes, Houston cannot communicate with the capsule. They cannot communicate with Houston. It's just dead silence. There's nothing. The world was watching this on TV. Everybody's anxiously waiting to hear something. And 3 minutes go past, and there's nothing. 3 minutes, 10 seconds. 3 minutes, 15 seconds. 3 minutes, 20 seconds. The time keeps ticking away with nothing, just complete silence from them. As you can imagine, as the people were watching this, as families were watching this, with every second that ticked away, a little hope probably ticked away, right? More despair set in. They're like, are they going to survive? Are they going to make it? Are we going to ever hear their voices again? This went on for 6 minutes. I can't imagine that 3 minutes of silence, twice as long as what they expected, as the world watched and waited to hear what happened. And right at that 6-minute mark, there's a crackle on the radio, and you hear the astronaut's voice, and you know that they survived re-entry. And so sometimes that's the way it feels with us, right? We're going through something, we're walking through something, and we just desperately want to hear God's voice, and we don't hear anything. And we listen, we think we're listening, and we don't hear anything. We don't see anything, and it just seems like God is silent. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. As we begin this series in Exodus on God's faithfulness revealed, we're going to be looking at when God seems silent. And so we're going to, Exodus is actually a fairly long book. It's 40 chapters. We're going to cover 40 chapters in 8 weeks, so you're going to have to buckle in because we're not doing a deep dive. We're taking big chunks. This morning we're looking at the first 2 chapters, and that means we're going to touch on points that maybe you guys would be like, why aren't you spending a lot of time there, right? I mean, this morning we're going to talk about Moses and Moses' birth and being put in the river, and oftentimes that's a story we all know very well, and that's a story a whole sermon's just crafted around. We're not going to craft a sermon around that whole story. We're going to look at the first 2 full chapters of the book. But before we get into that, I do want to set up kind of where we're at. Most people probably know what's going on here, but just in case, I want to walk us back a little bit and ground us in what was leading up to this time. So a couple weeks ago, you guys may remember I preached out of Genesis 12 and Abraham's call when God called him to leave his family and his land and go to the place that he would show him, right? And that's where I want us to start this story today. The context of what's going on is God calls Abraham in Genesis 12, and he gives him a promise. And he says in Genesis 12, in verses 1 through 3, he says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed," right? So Abram gets this call from God, and God makes a covenant with Abram right here in chapter 12 of Genesis. So this covenant is established that you come with me and I will bless you. I will make you a great nation. And so Abram is obedient. He goes, he follows God, and he goes to the land of Canaan, and he walks the land, and God tells him, everywhere you set your foot, I'm going to give you. Time goes on. We're going to fast forward a little bit, right? Because at this time, when the call, Abram is 75, has no kids. Now we're going to jump ahead till he's about 112, 113, and he has a son, right? He has a son, Isaac. And you guys remember the story of Isaac, and when he takes Isaac up on the mountain, and God says, "Hey, I want you to go up there and prepare your son to be sacrificed." And God ends up saving Isaac, right? This ram is in the thicket, and so they sacrifice the ram. Isaac lives because Isaac is the seed of this promise. And then in Genesis 26, Isaac has an encounter with God, and God reaffirms the covenant with him. And he says, "And the Lord appeared to him, Isaac, and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and to your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and will give your offspring all these lands. And in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws,'" right? So you hear that same covenant. I will give you this land, and I will multiply you. I will multiply your offspring. I will make you into a great nation. And through you and your seed and through your offspring, I will bless all nations. And so you guys may be familiar that then Isaac had twin boys, right? Jacob and Esau. It's always funny, as I was sitting there writing this, I was like, normally when you say the kids' names, you always say the older one first. You guys notice we don't, when you're talking about Jacob and Esau, you say Jacob and Esau. We don't say Esau and Jacob. Esau is the older one. He was the one that had the birthright, but through some conniving of Jacob's mom and Jacob, they tricked Isaac into blessing Jacob. Now, not appropriate, but we know that God works even when people don't do what they're supposed to do. And then we see in Genesis 28, God then repeats the same covenant with Jacob, and he says, "And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, 'I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised.'" Right? So that same covenant that God made with Abraham, he's reaffirmed with Isaac, and now Jacob, right? Isaac, yep, and then Jacob. And so then you're probably familiar with the story of Jacob and Joseph, right? The Joseph coat of many colors. Jacob has 12 sons, and Joseph being one of them, and he was the favored one, and his brothers are jealous of him, so they sell him into slavery. They were going to kill him. Some of them were going to kill him, but they end up selling him into slavery. He ends up in Egypt, right? So you see where this is going. We're leading up to why the Israelites are in Egypt. So Joseph gets sold into slavery into Egypt. He gains favor. There's a lot of things that happen with Joseph we're not going to go through, but he gains favor with the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh at the time, and is put in second in command of all of Egypt. Then there's a big famine in the land, and Jacob sends his boys off to find food, and they come to Egypt, and they walk in, and Jacob sees them and remembers, those are my brothers. They don't recognize him, but he knows who they are. And through some series of events, we see then that they send him back to go get Jacob and this youngest brother, and they all come to Egypt, and then that's where we're at today. Does that make sense? So all this has happened, and that's where we're picking up, and all this lead up in Genesis really sets the tone for Exodus of what's going on. And so as we get to Exodus, we're going to be in Exodus chapter 1. We're going to be looking at the first 2 chapters, but I'm not going to read all 2 chapters because we do want to finish church this morning. But if you have found Exodus chapter 1 and you have it with you, please stand up as we read God's holy word. We're going to read part of chapter 1, and we'll finish off at the end of chapter 2. Starting with verse 1. It says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, 'Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land.' Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves." Now flip over to chapter 2, verse 23. So all the way to the end of the chapter, and we'll read these last few verses. Verse 23, "During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue for slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew." You may be seated. So what we're going to look at here is this. There's this time period of Joseph and his dad Jacob, and all that family is in Egypt. There's 70 total there. And now we're gonna jump ahead a few hundred years. So we're a few hundred years past that time, and the Israelites have grown a lot. We'll touch on that in a second, right? They've multiplied. There's lots of them now. And the king of Egypt is not liking this, right? He's not happy. He's worried. What's interesting, though, is if we look at history during this time period, when Joseph came to Egypt, the king of Egypt was actually not an Egyptian. It's kind of interesting. He was from a different place. It was an outsider that was ruling Egypt at the time. And so now, these few hundred years later, the king of Egypt is actually an Egyptian. And so he's very weary of outsiders. He doesn't trust them. He doesn't trust all these Israelites are there. He's like, are they going to rise up? We were very dependent upon them. Are they going to leave us? Are they going to escape? Maybe they're going to side with our enemies and they're going to take over. We don't know. He's very wary of them. And so he enslaves them and he makes them their slaves and he treats them poorly. We see the Israelites are at a place where they need rescue. And that's the first point we're going to look at this morning is there's this need for rescue, this need for help. The Israelites are there and they need rescue. Like I said, they've rapidly grown. So to give some context, we don't know about when this started, how many they were, but we can put some bookends on it, right? At the start of the Israelites being in Egypt, there were 70 of them. When they leave, in a few chapters in Exodus, right, when they finally do leave, there's over 2 million of them. In just 430 years, they go from 70 to over 2 million. That's a large growth, right? That's fast. They grew quite rapidly. As we'll see here in a minute, they multiplied a lot. And so they've grown a lot. And so the king devises a plan because he's nervous, he's worried. He has this fear of them. And he says in verse 10, he says, "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses." The harshness that they were treated is just enormous, right? They were working 7 days a week, physical labor, building whole cities for the Egyptians. Not only that, but they were also working the fields and farming and agriculture and they were being worked hard to try to prevent them from multiplying, right? And think about when they're doing this. Think about that much work and what they're doing. They probably didn't have OSHA there to make sure that they were doing things safely, right? There was no OSHA coming in, making sure they were strapped in and that they 3 points of contact on the ladder and all those things, right? The Egyptian king here was like, let's work them hard. They'll get tired. Maybe some of the men who, when they're working, will die. This will be a good thing. We don't want all of them gone because we're dependent upon them. They're doing a lot of work for us. We need them to maintain our economic status, the things we're doing. We need the Israelites here to do work for us, but there's too many. We need some population control. So maybe a few will die out. We'll work some of them that are older. They're going to die earlier because they're working so hard. Maybe they're not good health. They may die off quicker. They're going to be so tired they don't have time to go have babies, right? So all these things that he's hoping will happen is what's going on here. But guess what? It doesn't work. As we learn here, it says, and they still multiplied greatly. So they're still growing rapidly. He's like, okay, that's not enough. So you go on, it says, but the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves. So now they're not just laborers, now they're slaves. So they're gone from just working them hard to treating them even harshly, right? It's okay to beat them. It's okay to probably take things from them. It's okay to, if you want to kill them, they're just slaves. It's okay. You can do all these things. And so they made their lives bitter with hard service. Not only were they building cities, now they're making the bricks. They're making the bricks with hay. We'll learn later on that even changes, right? Mud and hay. They're making bricks so they can build a city. And all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So they're keeping the pressure on. It's getting harder. Life is getting harder for the Israelites, right? They need rescue. It's getting hard. So they're continuing to work even more so. Again, 7 days a week, making bricks, building cities, farming, being treated poorly, probably being beaten. But Pharaoh's plans continue to fail. So even the more harshly they treat them, the more they multiply. They're multiplying more. And so time goes on, hard work and slavery. And he's like, this is not working. We've got to come up with a different plan. I need a new plan. As you go through chapter 1, you see then he's like, well, I have a plan. We're going to enlist the help of the Hebrew midwives. And when the Israelite women give birth, the midwives, I'm going to command them to kill any son that's born and let the daughters live, right? This is going to help with population control. We're going to thin out the herd a little bit. We're going to do some more population control, and so we're going to have these midwives. Maybe there's this idea of, hey, when they're giving birth, the midwife can do it before the baby even cries, and so maybe it's not so evident. It's not so in your face. We're gonna be a little bit sneaky here, but we're going to do this. But guess what? These midwives, midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. So they did not do what Pharaoh wanted. And so the Israelites are continuing to multiply. They're continuing to go on, right? They're still being treated harshly. They're still being worked as slaves. They still need rescue. And then Pharaoh calls the midwives and says, why aren't you doing what I commanded you to do? And they say, well, the Israelite women are hardy. They're a stout bunch, and they're giving birth before we get there, which we don't know, and we don't know if they're lying, if this is true. It could be true, but we see here maybe they delayed. Maybe they took their time to get there, and so they allowed the Israelite women time to give birth, so they didn't have to be put into the position to then secretly kill their sons. And so we see that this doesn't work, and so they keep multiplying. And so now the king of Egypt he's done. He's like, this is not working. No longer are we going to do this subtly. We're going to do it outrightly. Now the command was to all Egyptians that if you see a boy Israelite, a young boy Israelite, you can take him and throw him into the river. So now he's enlisted the help of Egyptians all over and said, if you see a baby boy, grab him, throw him into the river, throw him into the Nile. right? This is horrible. Think about what fear and dread the Israelites are living in, what they're living under. At any moment, their baby boys can be ripped out of their arms and thrown into the river, and there is no recourse. There's nothing they can do. And so all this goes on, and they are under so much oppression, so much harshness, so much cruelty. They need rescue. They need rescue. But we're no different from the Israelites. This is not going to become a political, I'm not going off on the political side of things. I want to talk about just your life. Things happen. Sometimes things are horrible in life. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes things happen we don't understand. And we just like, God, I need rescue. It could be job issues. It could be health issues. It could be family issues. It could be financial issues. All of us experience these things sometimes, and we just don't know what to do, and we cannot save ourselves. We need rescued, right? Sometimes we need rescue, just like the Israelites. This is several hundred years, and they may be wondering, where's God? Why is this happening to us? This is not just like a year-long thing that this is going on. We don't know how long it goes on, but it's going on for a while. Think about for the king of Egypt to understand if his plan is working, he's got to see that the population growth is shrinking, right? So he tries something. Hey, let's see if the midwives will do this. Well, they keep multiplying. Well, if they're multiplying, that means that there's some period of time, a year or 2 years, we see them multiplying. And then this next thing, it's a year or 2 years. When he was making them work harshly, you're not going to see instantaneous results, right? So we see multiple years going on with this. Not even thinking about what happens, which we'll get into a little bit, is when Moses, all right, we know Moses was born, he lived in Egypt for 40 years, and he runs away and he lives somewhere else for 40 years. So that's another 80 years that they're living in harshness. Think about the desperation, the wonder that they may have, the silence that they may be feeling because God has not rescued them yet. You may be going through something in life and you're like, God, I need rescued. And he's not rescued you yet. And you're thinking, why are you so silent? Where are you, God? The good news is God is still there and God is active. That's the second point I want to see is God's unnoticed faithfulness, even through all this stuff, as we walk through this. Did you guys pick up on God's faithfulness, even as we talk through all this stuff that was going on, the harshness? We look at what's going on in Egypt with the Israelites. We can see God's hand of faithfulness. We can see his activity at work. Do you remember the covenant as we went over that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? You guys remember what he said? He said to Abraham, I will make you a great nation. To Isaac, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven. To Jacob, your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. Right? In the first 19 verses of Exodus, do you know how many times the word multiply is used when it's talking about the Israelites? 4 times. It says and they multiplied, and they multiplied, and they multiplied, and they multiplied. Then in addition to that, 4 more times he says stuff like that they were growing, they were increasing, they were spreading throughout the land, right? This is evidence of God's activity. They may not have noticed it, they may not have seen it, but God made a covenant with them that he would make them into a great nation. He will multiply them. He's doing that even during this time when they needed rescue. God was active. God was faithful to the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You guys see that? God's hand was at work. Even when he seems silent, he's working. We just may not be noticing it. Whether we recognize it or not, God's at work. Not only that, look at the midwives. These midwives that were given a command to go do something, and they feared God more than Pharaoh. God is using these midwives through their fear of him to bring some relief and bring some salvation, right? They're being disobedient to they could have lost their life. Pharaoh could have easily said, you're not doing what I said, you're done. I'm going to find someone else who will. But he doesn't. Not only does he not do that, God blesses them. Guess what? they have kids. Likely midwives in the Israelite time period were women who didn't have children, who had gotten older, and were able to, at a drop of a hat, rush around the country to go deliver babies, right? Think about how busy. There's more than two. These are likely the ones in charge. But think about how busy the midwives were at. To go from 70 to multi-million people, they were a busy people. They didn't have time to have families. But that's usually what happened is the ones that were barren then were midwives. But look at what God did. We didn't read this part, but God, in their fear of him, he blessed them and he multiplied them. He gave them a family. He gave them children. God's activity at work, unnoticed. They probably didn't even notice it. They didn't even notice God's activity, but we see here that God was working. Not only that, but as you get into chapter 2, we see Moses being born, right? So Moses is born. He's not killed by the midwives. He's born. Not only that, but then his mom hides him for 3 months. When she can hide him no longer, right? You guys that have babies, you probably think about trying to keep a 3 or 4 month old quiet. Like, shh, you need to be quiet. The Egyptians are around, right? And so could no longer hide Moses. So she takes Moses, puts him in a basket, covers it with pitch, sets it in the Nile River. Seems like a good plan, right? It doesn't to me, but it did to her. God was directing her in what she should do. She puts him in this basket covered with pitch, uses the same terminology as what was used with Noah when he built the ark, right? It's the same. He fashioned this boat and he covered it with pitch. This really cool parallel here is this method of salvation, this protection. Moses is placed in the river. He floats down the river. Not only does he float down the river, God's hand upon this. Miriam's chasing the basket, watching as he floats. Probably the only person that could have saved Moses would have been Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter is the one that finds him. Any other Egyptian probably wouldn't have been allowed to keep the Israelite baby, right? But Pharaoh's daughter, dad's like, if my daughter wants this, I'm going to let her have it, right? This is, right? Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses, names him Moses, draws him up, and then Miriam runs up and says, I see you found a baby. Do you want me to go find a Hebrew woman to be a nursemaid? You know who the nursemaid was? Moses' mom. What a blessing. God's hand of faithfulness, even during this time where they need rescue. He raises up Moses. Moses grows up in Pharaoh's daughter's home, right? But he doesn't grow a heart for the Egyptians. He grows a heart for the Hebrews. He loves the Hebrews. He sees their plight. And when he's 40 years old, he sees the Egyptians treating a Hebrew man poorly. And then when he thinks no one's looking, he kills the Egyptian and buries him in the sand. You guys remember this story, right? So Moses is 40 years old. He's been in Egypt for 40 years now. He's lived for 40 years. He kills this Egyptian, buries him in the sand to try to hide what he's done because he knows what he's done is wrong. And then the next day, he sees two Hebrews fighting. They're in a fist fight. They're wrestling. They're brawling, whatever. And he breaks them up. And they're like, what? What are you going to do? You're going to kill us too? And Moses is like, whoa, it's not a secret. It's out there. And he runs for his life and he leaves. God's hand of activity, even in this, even in Moses' sin in killing a man, and then he flees. God's using it. He flees to Midian, where he meets his wife, has a kid, lives there for another 40 years before he ever comes back to Egypt. 80 years, God is preparing Moses for what lies ahead. God's unnoticed faithfulness. Even when we're in the middle of something, when we need rescue, God is faithful. He's working. If you're going through something right now, do you realize God's active in your life? Do you see it? Maybe you don't see it. Maybe you don't notice it. Have you stopped to ask God to reveal his hand and his work in your life? Have you asked him, God, I need to see what you're doing. I need to see your activity. Oftentimes, God seems silent when we are focused on our trials, right? We're so focused on our trials, that's all we can see is the hardships and the struggles that we're going through. That's when God seems silent. Where is your focus? Is your focus on your suffering, or is your focus on your Savior? Because if your focus is on your Savior, you're more likely to see God's hand of activity at work in your life. Because, as we can see here, God is active even when we don't notice it. He's not silent. We may feel like he's silent, but he's working, he's active, he's doing things, and we can trust that. The third thing I want us to see is not only is God's unnoticed faithfulness, but that God hears, God remembers, and God sees. As we closed out that chapter 2 in verse 23, it says, during those many days the king of Egypt died. So this king that had been harsh, that had been devising all these plans, he dies. And the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Right? So we know there's at least 80 years of oppression that the Egyptians are going through because of how long Moses was alive, right? We know there's at least 80 years. It's probably more like 100 years of oppression, of harshness that's going on. And so the Israelites had lived in Egypt for over 300 years. This harshness comes along. It's horrible. It's hard. And they cry out for help, and we hear that God heard their groaning. Their cries for help don't fall on deaf ears. Your cries for help don't fall on deaf ears. Listen to how King David says this in one of his Psalms. In Psalm 18, 1-6, he says, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. God hears. He heard the Israelites. He heard David. That same God is the same God that we serve today. He hears us. Right? He's not like you and I. Right? He doesn't get distracted. He's not too busy. He hears his children. Listen to what John says in 1 John 5:14. And this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he will hear us. In your distress, don't be afraid to cry out to God. He hears us. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, thank the Lord he's not like me, right? There's those times when I'm face down in my phone, sitting on the couch, and Nikki says something to me, and I'm just like scrolling along, and she's like, hello, do you hear me? And it's not that I'm purposely ignoring her. I just do not hear her. I am so engrossed in something else that I don't even hear her. My brain can only take so much, right? So much inputs. And if I'm focused here, these things shut off. That is not the God we serve. He is not too busy. He's not too distracted. There's no problem that's too small that he's ignoring you. He hears you. He hears you when you cry out. We are given that as a promise. He hears us. He is an ever-present help in time of trouble, right? He's walking alongside of us. Cry out for help when you need rescue. He hears you. You can have confidence that. Not only does he hear us, but he remembers. It says, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So let's talk about this a second. When it says he remembered, what does that mean? Does that mean that he forgot? Like God's over here, he's like busy doing this other stuff, and he's like, oh, I'm just doing this stuff. Like, the Israelites cried out, oh, that's right. I made this promise to Abraham. Oh, I almost forgot. I better get back to it. No, that's not what this means. When he says remembered, it means God was active in fulfilling the covenant. That's what it means, remembered. It's not that he forgot and had to start up again, right? And even as we read it, we saw that. God was fulfilling his covenant all through this time. He multiplied them. They increased. They grew. He multiplied them. They spread throughout the land, right? God was actively fulfilling the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's what it means by he remembered. His promises, his covenant, God is actively fulfilling those things. It's not like he's like, hey, I promise I will listen to you, and then he's off doing something and you cry out and he's like, oh, wait, was I supposed to do something? No. He's actively fulfilling his promises. He doesn't forget them. He remembers them constantly. Listen to this. King David again in Psalms 105, 8 through 11, he says, he remembers his covenant forever. He doesn't forget. He remembers it forever. The word that he commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant that he made with Abraham, his sworn promise to Isaac, which he confirmed to Jacob as a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as your portion for your inheritance. We serve a God who does not forget. He remembers the promises he's made, and he actively keeps them. We don't have to remind him. We can. When we remind him, it makes us remember, but we're not reminding him because he forgot. We serve a God that remembers those promises. So many promises, right? We went over them a couple weeks ago. Many of the promises that he's made to us, we can rely on them. We can trust him because we serve a God who remembers. Not only does he hear and remember, but notice the third one is that God saw. God saw the people of Israel and God knew. Their plight doesn't go unnoticed. Their suffering is not unnoticed. God sees them. God sees what they're going through. It's not like he's off, again, doing his own thing, and then he doesn't see what's going on, and they have to cry out to say, hey, do you see what's happening? God sees them. Oftentimes, we're like that, right? We're struggling with stuff, and we wonder, God, do you see what I'm going through? Do you know what's happening? Did you look away for a minute? God, I'm here. Because that's how we feel. But that's not the truth. God sees us. Sometimes we want immediate relief, and when that doesn't happen, we start wondering, does God see us? Those 3 minutes go by that this is the amount of time we're okay with it being quiet, but then it ticks off another 30 seconds and another 30 seconds, and we're like, God, I expected something last week. Why am I still going through it this week? And we start doubting and wondering. We can be confident God sees us, people. He sees us, church. He loves us. He's not forgotten us. Even when you feel like he has, he sees us. Is that not what we as people want? We want to be seen. We want to be known. Think about all the things that a kid does when they think they're being ignored, right? They act up. They'll go kick their feet. They'll go pull something off the counter, right? Not only kids, sometimes pets do this. I was at my mom's this week, and one of her cats was being ignored. He got up on the counter and pushed something off the counter because he wanted some attention, right? We are no different. We want attention, we act out. I'm not getting attention by doing the things I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to do something else that I know will get me attention, right? We want to be seen. We want to be known. We desperately want to be known. The problem is we as humans distort that desire into something that it's not. Because we want to be known, and so we start acting out in different ways that make us be known differently than how God created us. Who knows us best? Our Creator, our God. He sees us. He sees you. He knows how he made you. You don't have to sin to get his attention. Sometimes we think we do. Sometimes we want to go to the extreme because we want to be seen. We want to be known. But God ultimately knows who you really are, even if you're acting not like how he created you. The Bible tells us in Romans 5:8, but God commended his love toward us, even that while we're still sinners, Christ died for us, right? Even when we mess up, God still sees through that and knows what you were created for. And he provided a way for us. We see here the Israelites in this story of God's faithfulness through this wonderful story of Exodus, which is such when we look at the whole book of Exodus, it's such a picture for how God saves his creation, right? He saved his people of Israelites. He sends someone to lead them, to save them, and then we get into the Passover and all those things, which is a beautiful picture. It's no different. It's such a small example of what God has done on the bigger scale. We needed rescue. In our sin, if you've not come to the point in your life where you've accepted Christ as your Savior, you need rescue. You cannot save yourself. You may be acting out so you can be seen. You may be doing things you shouldn't do. You may be saying, "This is who I am. I don't want to be that. I want to do things my way." And it's not going that great. Do you need rescue? Do you need to cry out for God to rescue you? His hand is at work even then. Before I came to know him, he was working to make a way of rescue for me. Was he not? He made a way of rescue for you. He sent his Son from heaven, Christ, who is fully God, put on human form, right? He took on the form of man. He suffered the way we suffer. He went through the things we went through. He's hungry like, right? I put this in the weekly word this week. This idea that Christ was man. He had the same physical needs that we have. He needed sleep. He got tired. He needed food. He got hungry. Right? Think about how sometimes we can't even resist little temptations when we're tired. We get tired and we get cranky. We snap at our loved ones, right? Why'd you do that? Well, I'm tired. Really? That's our excuse? It is. That's what we do. Christ was tired, got tired just like us. Christ got hungry just like us. He went into the wilderness for 40 days. He fasted for 40 days. Can you imagine how hungry he was? There was no Snickers to curb his hangriness. He was not hangry, but he was hungry. 40 days he fasted and was tempted beyond anything we could ever be tempted with. Satan himself came down and tempted Jesus. Yet he did not sin. He lived a perfect life because we can't. We are all sinful people that deserve punishment. We deserve death. The wages of sin is death. And we serve a God who is a just God, right? Sin has to have punishment. There has to be some kind of judgment of guilty. Guilty. That's us. We're guilty. Christ stepped in and took our place, took the judgment that we deserved. We deserved to be hanging on that cross. He took that judgment and died for our sins. He took the penalty so we didn't have to. Rescue. We needed rescue. God provided a way. We cry out for rescue. But blessed, he did not stay on that cross. He did not stay in the tomb. On the third day, he rose again, victorious over sin and over death, and has made a way for us. All we have to do is accept it. Accept the free gift of eternal life. We just need to reach out our hand and say, God, I accept Christ. I believe that he lived a perfect life. He died for our sins and he rose from the dead, and now he's offering to me the free gift of salvation. All I have to do is surrender my life to Christ and make him boss. That means stop living for myself and living for Jesus now. Rescue. Maybe, believer, you're going through something right now and it seems like God's silent. And you're wondering, is he there? Is he listening? God is faithful. As we saw here this morning, we can hang on to that. Hang on to the promises, the truths of Scripture, even when you don't feel like it. Even more so when you don't feel it. Those are the times that God's word needs to be even more cherished, is when we don't necessarily fully believe it. We're doubting it. We're questioning it. We're wondering, God, are you there? Hang on to his word, people. He is there. He is active. He is faithful even when we don't notice it. He sees, he hears, he remembers. That's the God we serve.